Brilliant. Thank you everyone for logging in to our Wellness Wednesday live webinar. This is a platform focused on health and wellness with guest speakers and specialists answering your questions about physical and mental well-being. My name is Zarmina and I'm delighted to be on this journey with you today. Please remember you may submit your questions in for our speaker through the chat feature on this platform, and we will get to them in the second half. I'm so excited to introduce to you our speaker of the day, Dr. Yael Gold-Samir. She is an MD and a researcher from the Hebrew University, co-founder and CEO at Embryonics, where she leads the development of AI solutions to improve the process and results of fertility treatments. Embryonics' first product is a smart AI platform that monitors and selects the best embryo in IVF significantly better than human experts. Thank you so much for being with us here today, Dr. Yael, and for being in Dubai for the first time. We're so pleased to have you. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you. I'm also, likewise, I'm super excited to be with you today. And it's been a while. We were planning on this, so I'm happy that it's happening.
Well, we're so pleased to have you, and particularly for the topic that we're about to discuss today. You are an expert in this field and you're working on embryonics as well, and we will get into that a little bit later. But can we start with telling us, when should one start thinking about the fertility journey? When is the right time, and what considerations should one make when embarking upon this journey?
So I think that, it's very subjective. It's a very personal issue, and it really depends on the culture and, on the plans of the individual, his career, his family, etc. So, on the one hand, it's very subjective, but while I'm saying it, I will also say that there are some basics that I think that everyone, especially women, should make sure that they are aware of them. And I think it should happen, a few years before they actually think of, trying to get pregnant. So there are some basic, I think there are two basic questions. There are very basic questions that every woman should know. And I'll just walk through them briefly. So the first question is that, what are the components of a healthy pregnancy? Like, what should be done or what should be available for a healthy pregnancy? So it's very simple. And so first we need a healthy egg, right? So by the way, in the medical language, we call eggs oocytes. So sometimes you can find articles where they call it not egg, but an oocyte. So you need to have a healthy egg. And we all know that a woman is born with limited given number of eggs. And this cohort, as the woman ages, so this cohort is diminishing both in quality and in quantity. So this is first thing. Second, we need to have healthy sperm. Next thing, we need to have the healthy fallopian tube. Fallopian tube is actually the place where sperm meets the egg and the fertilization occurs in the fallopian tube. So for example, a woman that went through major abdominal surgeries, just one example, potentially might have, potentially can have problems with her fallopian tube that was affected from the surgery. Just one example. There might be other reasons for problems with fallopian tube. Of course, we need to have a healthy uterus. This is the place where ultimately the embryo will be implanted and the baby will grow there. And the last thing, and maybe the most important thing, is that we need to have a healthy, functioning hormonal system. So our body is a finely tuned machine, and this machine, in many aspects, is controlled by hormones. And especially when it comes to reproduction. So I can say that the hormones are the conductor of this orchestra, You need, and besides the obvious hormones, sex hormones that obviously are directly linked to fertility, we need to remember that also other hormonal disorders, like, people who have problems with their thyroid, like chronic conditions sometimes, people who have diabetes, people who have problems with prolactin and other hormones. Also this, because there is no direct and indirect connection between different hormones in our body. So also these situations can affect our fertility and our chances to become pregnant. And the second question that I want to answer very briefly, so how it works. how the whole system, this whole components that I mentioned, sperm, egg, hormones, fallopian tube, and uterus, how it how it happens. So very briefly, and I think everyone should understand this basics, is that once a month there is a hormone that comes from our brain, and I'm talking on women. By the way, I'm very excited that this is a special session for women. I think that it needs to be a special session for men as well, but we'll discuss it in another time. So once a month, there is a hormone that comes from the brain. The name of this hormone is FSH, and this hormone affects our ovaries. It actually helps the eggs in our ovaries to grow. Now, the eggs in our ovaries, we call them follicles, because follicles are structures that contain the eggs in the ovaries. So this FSH affects the follicles to grow, and eventually only 1 or 2 follicles will reach the right size, and only 1 or 2 follicles out of the cohort, of the monthly cohort, will eventually will ovulate. The ovulation is the act when the follicle, actually the egg is, leaves the follicle, leaves the ovary. So only 1 or 2 will ovulate. And also this ovulation, this timing of the ovulation is controlled by a hormone that comes from the brain. And the name of the hormone is LH. So you can imagine that the egg just left the ovary, it was ovulation day. And then this egg is picked by the fallopian tube. You have the egg, this egg is picked by the fallopian tube. And now the egg will wait for the sperm in the fallopian tube. Now, time-wise, the egg can wait there for a few hours, few hours, 12 hours, not more than that. And hopefully by that time, there will be a sperm waiting for her. Now, a sperm is coming from the vagina. A sperm cell can last in the women reproduction system for 3 days. So it's less sensitive, time-wise. And hopefully sperm will meet the egg will be fertilized, and now we have an embryo. The embryo will last in the fallopian tube again. The fertilization occurs in the fallopian tube. And that's why it's very important to have a healthy and open fallopian tube. And, the first 3 days, the embryo will stay in the fallopian tube. And then by day 5, with the help of the fallopian tube, it will be directed to the uterus, and hopefully it will be implanted in the uterus. And again, all this process is controlled by hormones like estrogen and progesterone. So this is high level. I think the basics that everyone should know and digest, at least a few years before they plan on, embarking on their fertility journey.
That's great. I think you've hit such a key point that it's a matter of a few years before embarking on the journey that one should start becoming aware. And you've touched upon hormones as the orchestrator. So, we hear a lot about the notion that fertility is affected by age. I would suppose it's not directly age, but rather the impact that age may have on hormones. What is that correlation with age, and what other factors can affect fertility, and how can we improve the success rates of conceiving?
Well, this is a great question, I think, actually. So you're right, Zarmina. Age is a crucial factor when it comes to fertility. It's really like a central player, I would say. And I would like to talk in numbers, So if we look at women at the age of, when they're at their 30s, okay, we're trying to conceive. And so during 12 months, we will see that, around 80% of them, 80%, which is, a lot, will conceive naturally. And then the rest, it depends, but the rest will need some help, right? But if we're looking at women at their age of 40 and their 40s, so we see that their chances to conceive naturally are just, it drops, substantially. And not only do they have low chances to become pregnant naturally, but also those who got pregnant, they face, they have faced a very high chance to end their pregnancy, to lose their pregnancies, actually. So it's about 30% of pregnancy loss for those women who got pregnant, who overcome the statistics of getting pregnant at their 40s. Still, they have another 30% of losing their pregnancy. And the reason that we see it as I mentioned, both low chances to conceive and also high chances of pregnancy loss is really due to the fact that our ovarian reserve, right? That our ovarian reserve is diminishing, I said, both in quality and in quantity. So it means that you just have fewer eggs left. And also those who are left are, I would call it low quality, but to be more precise, it means that genetically there are, it's weaker eggs and higher chances of like chromosomal aberrations, etc. And this is why we'll see, the high prevalence of pregnancy loss. But as you mentioned, age is not the only factor that affects fertility, or actually infertility. There are many other factors, and I think I will focus on two factors that I think are, kind of very influential. So first factor is obesity. So obesity, it's better to define with BMI. So we know that an average BMI is between 18 to 25, let's say, like the global. So if we see women who are with BMI above 25, right? By the way, also, an extreme low BMI is also not healthy for pregnancy, but women who are above 25 BMI, with BMI that's higher than 25, have significantly lower chances, to become pregnant. And there's like a direct impact on their infertility. And by the way, also men, not only women. Also for men, obesity is not healthy for their fertility. We're not going, I want to go into details on men, but it's obviously not healthy both for men. So, then one of the questions that comes up many times, women would say, okay, if I'm obese and I want to get pregnant, so maybe I need to postpone my plans, try to go on a diet, take, a year or 6 months or something, try, start sports, go on a diet, etc., lose weight, and only then start, trying to conceive. This is a common question. So the answer is no. The recommendation is not waiting. Do not postpone your plans when it comes to fertility, because, still I remind you that the age, is a major player here, and you don't want to spend, to waste time or wait. If you are obese women and you're planning on, having children this year, so you can start, trying to conceive, but and don't postpone. So you won't have the penalty of waiting infertility. But at the same time, I must say that there are, things like moderate physical activity, like daily jogging, walking, swimming, not extreme sport, which is not healthy for fertility. I'm not talking, when professional extreme sport, but, really moderate physical activity is highly recommended. Go, start, healthy with healthy nutrition. This is a very, highly recommended to women. And if you need help and you see it doesn't work, so you can get help from, fertility specialists, but do not postpone your plans. And I just want to add that not only it's not like obesity, it's not just about, harder to conceive, but also women who got pregnant while they're obese, there are a lot of other complications they will face. And the fact that a baby is growing in this environment, in their bodies, it also affects the baby, in terms of epigenetics and the chances of this baby to suffer from hypertension and obesity later in his life. So it's highly recommended to try and I guess it's not, I'm not saying something new to people. I'm just adding that besides other bad, negative impacts that obesity have, it also impacts fertility. And the last thing I want to mention is smoking. So smoking is one of the factors that has a very negative, very negative impact on infertility. What we see is that women who smoke have 60% less chances to conceive naturally. And not only women, it's also men. It also affects sperm count and sperm concentration. So many men don't know, but it's also for men. And the interesting fact is that, so we know that they have 60% less chances to conceive, but Also, if they go on fertility treatments, those who smoke, they have 2 times more chances to fail on their fertility treatments because of smoking. So smoking is, something which I would highly recommend for people who are trying to conceive and they want to maximize their chances. Just stop, try, keep smoking. I know it's hard. Like I have friends who are going through it. It's hard, but try your best. It just will make your way, it will shorten your way to the baby. And there are other factors that I think, there are some are controversial, some are, kind of minor factors, but, like caffeine, alcohol, other supplements, etc. But these factors like age, obesity, smoking are, I think, more important.
That's so helpful. I think that's a lot of new information for our viewers and for myself as well. You touched upon the important point of not only is getting pregnant the goal there, the goal is keeping it a healthy pregnancy, right? Because there can be complications associated. There could at times be maybe it doesn't reach a full-term pregnancy. So we find a lot of blame and shame around miscarriage. Why do they happen and how can we keep a pregnancy to term? What can we do about that actively?
Wow, this is I think a pain point for many women. And so pregnancy loss, going through pregnancy loss could be incredibly hard, both physically and emotionally. And it's naturally, and it's very, and I think it's just very natural that people ask themselves, why did it happen to me? What could have I done to avoid it, to save my baby? And people tend to blame themselves, especially women tend to blame themselves, like to say things like, oh, I left something heavy, I was too stressful, it's my work, I got into an argument, I should have done it. I like really try to find a reason why it happened, and in order to kind of explain it for themselves so I can understand it very natural. But Zarmina, the truth is that in most of the cases, okay, up to 80% of miscarriages, especially at the first trimester of the pregnancy, are happen because of genetic abnormalities, because of what we call unfluidity, which is the wrong number of chromosomes. The level it's something, and the number of the chromosomes is designed at the moment of the fertilization. Remember the fallopian tube that I mentioned at the beginning of our talk? So while the sperm meets the egg in the fallopian tube and the fertilization, of course, this is the time where the number of the chromosomes is designed, actually. So basically what it means that if it was a miscarriage, so there, when the first part, especially at the beginning of the pregnancy, it means that actually from the moment this embryo was created, he suffered from this, unfluidity, from this genetic condition. And actually from the moment it was created, he had no chances to survive. So in most of the cases, there is no one that you can blame. Okay. So it's not, it's just, it's a wrong thinking. It's not, and the truth is, it's just, no one is responsible for this. It just happened. Of course, it's very hard, and I think that it's just very hard. And on top of this very hard, really heartbreaking experience, it's also very hard because that the woman is not responsible for, is not, we know she doesn't need to blame herself, and no one can blame her for this in most of the cases. But on top of it, as you mentioned, the miscarriage is still considered to be kind of a taboo, like a global taboo. People don't like to talk about miscarriage, like on pregnancy loss. Miscarriage is something that people don't feel comfortable to open it up, even with their friends. Mm-hmm. And while the statistics show that about 50% of women of reproductive age have experienced miscarriage, so it's so prevalent. Why should we, why it's still a taboo? I think that if we'll be a bit more open to just create an environment when a woman can come up and say, listen, I went through, and pregnancy loss, and I feel, this way and that way, and this people would, she will feel comfortable to tell her story. I think it will make her, this heartbreaking experience a bit easier for the couples. And the last thing I want to say, I think it just, as a result, I don't know what is the reason and what is the result, but let's, stop for a second and think on the term miscarriage. What does it mean to us, this language, miscarriage? Is it like misunderstand, mistake, misspell? When someone misunderstood something or when someone misspelled something, so it basically means that he was wrong about, he did something wrong, right? But miscarriage, women who went through pregnancy loss, it doesn't mean that she did something wrong with, like, she didn't carry well the baby. No, it doesn't mean that. In any case, it was due to something that she had no control over. And I think that it kind of starts with the language. Think of miscarriage as opposed to pregnancy loss, when it, puts the patient in the center and she lost something now, and she can't help it. But miscarriage is, even the language is a bit blaming without even noticing. So it's just a point to think about how we refer to pregnancy loss and what does it make to the people who go through it, and do we enable them to open up when we call it miscarriage? Just, a point to think about.
That's such a key point, and thank you so much for bringing attention to that. I think sometimes we, are on autopilot and repeat what we hear without even understanding the impact. And you shared a statistic of how prevalent it is. Did you say 50%?
50% of women of reproductive age will experience miscarriage. Will experience miscarriage. So it basically means that everyone knows women who went through miscarriage. Like each of us here in the session today, we know women that went through miscarriage. Either ourselves, our friends, our sisters, our sister is alone, someone in our family. And so think how prevalent it is, and still we don't feel 100% comfortable with, just bringing it up.
Yeah. I think that's such an important takeaway from today. So somebody, you've been so deeply involved with the research in fertility. Where should somebody look for qualified information? Somebody who doesn't have that medical background or expertise, an individual like myself, or somebody, I know a lady who is trying to conceive. Where should she look for qualified and reliable information?
So first of all, I will say when. It's also very important, right? So when should one kind of understand that he needs to get help with its infertility, or when can one understand that he is considered to be infertile, right? And then he needs to seek for help. So basically, and the women who are under the age of 35. So the high level recommendation is to wait, 12 months, try to conceive naturally 12 months. And if it doesn't work, then try to have an appointment with a reproductive endocrinologist. So this is the address you're looking for, reproductive endocrinologist. You're not looking for Google. You're not looking for magazines, with so many myths, and I'll touch this myth point in a moment. You need a reproductive endocrinologist. I know that in some countries you need first to see a gynecologist, and then he can refer you to the reproductive endocrinologist. And in some countries you can just directly, have an appointment with a reproductive endocrinologist. But women in their 40s, like women who are above the age of 35, are highly recommended. Their recommendation is to wait 6 months, and and then if it doesn't work, try to have an appointment with a reproductive endocrinologist. But this is kind of a high-level recommendation. If a woman knows that in her family there is a history, or she has a personal history, like people who had cancer, or people who have suffer from other chronic conditions. It could be many diseases, many conditions. I won't go into the list, but people who know that they suffer from chronic conditions are taking for many years are taking medication due to their chronic conditions, etc. or people who know that they have a family history of recurrent pregnancy loss. So in these cases, I would be more aware and won't wait like 12 months and try to seek help before. And if it doesn't necessarily mean that, by the way, that you will need the help, it could be a chronic disease that's, you're balanced and everything is okay. But I prefer being on the safe side. So just make sure that, you're aware of everything and how your chronic condition impacts your fertility. And so this is, and again, I would try to, to meet a reproductive endocrinologist and talk to him and, go take the blood test that you need to take. And, don't, I hear so many myths around fertility, starting from try to eat pineapple, I don't know, like so many things. I don't know, the moon, try, to have intercourse in some certain time, depending on how the moon look like many different myths. Most of them are wrong. Like, at least they were never backed by studies. And this is like the tools that I have to evaluate, recommendations. So most of them are wrong. And sometimes people spend a lot of time and money instead of just going, through the, I think, shortest way. Just have an appointment with the doctor. He will go through your medical case and he will tell you, what's the right thing to do for you, especially in your specific case. And so this is, I would say, like general recommendation.
Thank you for addressing the myths. I think there's a lot of, those magazine articles and those old wives' tales that go around, and you hear some pretty interesting stuff that may not always be super accurate. So it's great to have you address that. I think I must ask you about the 3 most common letters in, when it comes to fertility, and that is IVF. Why is it so popular, and how can AI revolutionize IVF?
Okay, so IVF, it stands like in 3 letters, as you mentioned. IVF stands for in vitro fertilization. So IVF basically is a widely used fertility treatment. It's a definitive treatment for infertility. And basically in IVF, the natural process of fertilization, the one that I just described, in the beginning of our conversation, is totally replaced with a laboratory process. So instead, having the scene of a sperm meets the egg at the fallopian tube, we harvest the egg from the woman, and then this process happens in an operation room. We have now our eggs, and we take the sperm from the man. We look at the sperm and at the egg to, under the microscope, to see how they look. We try to pick the best candidates, and then the fertilization occurs in the laboratory. And the embryo, which naturally, is created in the fallopian tube and stays there for 3 days, and only by day 5 is, getting to the uterus. The embryo is cultivated actually in the laboratory, and not the embryo. Usually you have a cohort of embryos for each patient, because you don't take just 1 egg and 1 sperm. You take a cohort of cohort of eggs, and and also quite a lot of sperm, and then you have few embryos for a woman, for a couple, and then everything is just done by their laboratory experts. They will choose the best embryo, and this embryo will be transferred directly to the uterus. So it just, this whole process, as I mentioned, is replaced with the laboratory process, because this is IVF. And we see that, in recent, first of all, IVF was invented about 40 years ago. The first IVF baby, her name, by the way, is Lois Brown. And I think, 2 weeks ago or something, it was her birthday. So wow. So it was about 30 years ago, first tube baby, okay? And the thing about IVF is that when IVF was invented, the time when she was born, the time that she was born, so the goal was to really help people who have medically related infertility. Also some of the reasons that we mentioned today, some other reasons, people cannot have children naturally because they suffer from medical conditions that limit them. But today, people approach IVF, and this is one of their kind of catalyzers that make IVF such a big industry and such a strong industry, is because people approach IVF today do it for many other reasons, beyond infertility, beyond medically related infertility. It could be because people who want to have children later in life, got married in a later age, or people just want to have career before and then have children. As we witness the cultural shifts today, so we see that it's something that becomes more and more prevalent. People who are carriers of genetic diseases. So IVF enables you to choose the baby, like to choose the embryo that doesn't carry the genetic disease. So it's also a solution for people who are genetic disease carriers. It's a good solution for cancer patients who can, preserve their eggs and their sperm before going on to chemotherapy and radiotherapy, and then they can have children later in life. So for many other, social, cultural reasons, IVF became very prevalent, and this, creates huge, current population who approach IVF, and I think much bigger potential population that will approach IVF in the coming years. And so this is I think answers the question, what is IVF and why is it becoming so popular? And on the second part of the question, how AI can improve IVF. So I can say that generally speaking, you can just close your eyes and think of how our world looked like before the AI and technology entered and actually became, part of every aspect of our lives. If it's, using Waze for driving, ordering things, mobility, food tech, everything is controlled today by AI, and it shows we have many proofs that technology can outperform humans in many aspects. Okay, so also in IVF, there are many aspects of IVF, especially, for example, the decision-making process in IVF. When you need, IVF is actually a sequence of procedures and decisions that need to be done. I just described it very briefly, and I kind of simplified it, but you can think of the whole process and all the medications that are involved and all the technical procedures that are physical procedures that are involved in IVF. So there is a lot of value in introducing technologies in this field. Is not only it improves the process like many other processes that we are aware of, but it also can actually help to bring more life. And this is what I think the role of AI in IVF.
So can you tell us a little bit more about the data-driven solutions and how they can improve the journey and the success rate? And I think if you can tie that into embryonics, so to help our viewers really understand what it is that Embryonics does.
Okay, absolutely. So first of all, Embryonics is the company that I co-founded almost 2 years ago, together with two computer scientists from Israel. One of them is the head of the Intelligent System Unit at the Israeli Technion, which is kind of the Israeli MIT. And the second one is also a computer scientist, a PhD from Microsoft Cambridge, and a senior deep learning researcher at Apple. It is last position before he joined me. And what we do in Embryonics is that we are focused on developing data-driven solutions to improve the process and the results of fertility treatments. So data-driven actually means that you're taking the advantage of all the available information that you have in order to get a smarter decision. So I'll give you one example. The embryos that I mentioned before. So in IVF, each patient have a cohort of embryos, and these embryos are kept in special incubators, instead of in the human and the women reproductive system. So in IVF, these embryos are kept in special incubators for 3 to 5 days before they're transferred to the women's uterus. And one of the crucial decisions that needs to be done is that what embryo has the highest chances to become a healthy baby, and what embryos have very low chances to become a healthy baby, so I won't use them, and I want to transfer only one embryo because I want to I want to avoid the complications of twins, triplets, etc. So I want to have one baby, but the healthiest one. And this is a very major decision. So today, what many people don't know, so basically there is a huge variation between different clinics and different physicians and different laboratories of what's the right way to take this decision. And basically, today this decision is made almost the same way it was done 40 years ago. And this is just an example, but many decisions in IVF are taken in a very similar kind of traditional way, subjective way, a lot of trial and error, and the gut feeling of the doctor based on his experience. And then we see that these decisions are based on small set of parameters, again, very traditional. But when you introduce data-driven solutions, so it actually means that you take all the available information, everything. If you have images, you have videos, you have biochemical information in the embryo and its environment, and blood tests, genetic information, clinical information on the couple, on the mother. You can take all this available information to build an algorithm that can digest this information. It's not such an easy task. It's very complicated technology-wise, but you can do it on behalf of those patients. And then the decision that you get is much more smarter. It's kind of taking the most experienced doctor and having something that's smarter than him, because you can kind of process the information from millions of patients and get a much smarter decision. And what we saw at Embryonics, for example, for the decision of embryo selection, when it comes to recognizing the best embryo, so we saw that using AI algorithms that we built, the system that we built, our kind of, this is our first product, by the way, but the system that we built is consistently outperforming human experts, even the best ones. And it's not surprising. It doesn't mean that they are better or something. We know that for many other areas that, technology outperform humans. So we see that we are consistently better than them, both in terms of recognizing good embryos and saving them from being dismissed. And also, and maybe more important, recognizing bad embryos and saving them from being, transferred, saving the woman from, for saving the pregnancy loss from the mother, because if the wrong embryo will be transferred, it will end up with miscarriage or pregnancy loss. So this is just, in a nutshell, but the same method, it's kind of the use case that I just shared with you, but you can imagine that actually every step along the life cycle of fertility treatments, if it's, building the right medication protocols, etc., every step could be optimized with AI, with data-driven solutions. So this is what we're aiming for.
So that's great. There's so much change, and I would say it's becoming more and more rapid. Particularly, companies like yourself, what you're doing. How is the landscape of fertility treatment changing from what you've seen? From your research, from what Embryonics is doing. How have physicians adopted that? Are they comfortable with that? How have the end users, how have women, felt about this solution? Where is this landscape heading?
So I think that it's very exciting times. We're in a very exciting period, because I believe that in 7 years, 10 years, the IVF and the fertility landscape will be totally different from what we are familiar with. Currently, the whole process is manual, and the whole decision-making process, as I mentioned, very traditional. The thinking is very traditional, but we're now at and I think that what moves this field, to the future is, first of all, the huge amount of patients who need the help of IVF, and the second is the fact that currently the success rates of fertility treatments are quite low. So the average, like the global success rates of IVF is around 27%. And this, again, it's an average, right? But this situation, stagnated for many years now. And one of the reasons that the current methods have reached their performance wall. And so it all pushes the field, forward. And I believe that in 7 years, the whole process will be fully automated. There will And I already have friends who are working on robots that will automate the whole fertilization process. We will not need humans to stand with tubes in their hands, look at the embryos. We will have technologies that will screen, the same like we build in embryonics. I believe this is the future. We'll have technologies that will screen the information, will give recommendations. We'll have robots that will make, the physical part of, combining the egg with the sperm, etc., and testing the embryos and etc. So it will be, I think we're in at the edge of a very exciting era, for fertility, and it's going to be completely different. You can just imagine robots and AI that will control this field, and hopefully what we see already today, but I believe that in the future it will be we'll see much better success rates.
Thank you so much. I think that ties in so well with your tagline, bringing new life wisely. It's such a perfect and concise way to capture all that you've explained. I just wanted to touch upon that before we open the floor to Q&A. So we're getting some questions. So Dr. Yael, I will read out the questions our viewers have submitted. We have one viewer asking, what is the risk of child abnormalities and risk of child IQ if the woman has her child in her early 40s?
So, as I mentioned before, when it comes to early 40s, so the ovarian reserve, this is the medical term for the eggs that are left in the ovaries, is diminishing both in quality and in quantity. So I think that for this question, I will elaborate more on the quality side. So it just means that the eggs are genetically, it's a lower quality genetically wise. So I don't think it has something to do with IQ. At least I'm not familiar with research that have examined it. But it's just that there is higher chances for genetic aberrations like Down syndrome and other syndromes, and higher rate of miscarriages, because some genetic abnormalities just will end up with pregnancy loss, but others there is a chance that it will be a baby that it will be it will turn out to be like a live baby. So there's higher chances to genetic conditions like like Down syndrome is the most prevalent in this age. But I'll just mention that today there are technologies, especially in IVF, if this woman will approach IVF. So there are methods to screen the embryos genetically to make sure that the embryo that is transferred back is genetically healthy. So again, I'm not familiar with IQ issues. It's more just, the physical health, genetic health.
Great, thank you. We have another viewer asking, do you use PGD, plantation genetic diagnosis, in selecting the best embryo?
I didn't hear the first part of the question. I'm sorry.
Do you use PGD, plantation genetic diagnosis, in selecting the best embryo?
Yes. So, and now I understood. So PGT is actually another 3 letters, which are very popular in IVF. So PGT is pre-implantation genetic testing. So what I mentioned when I was answering the last question is we have today tools to examine the embryos to make sure that they're genetically, healthy. So PGT is one of the tools. It means that while the embryo is developing in the lab, before it's transferred back to like this cohort of embryos are developing while they're in the lab, you can do a PGT test, which actually means to biopsy the embryos, take few cells from each embryo, send them to a genetic laboratory, analyze their DNA, and then you can either ask for specific genetic abnormalities. You can ask for that, make sure that my embryos don't have BRCA mutation, for example, for people who have this problem, or make sure that my embryos don't have, don't have chromosomal aberrations like Down syndrome and other prevalent syndromes. And then that the embryo is transferred is healthy. What we do in embryonics is that we introduce non-invasive genetic testing, which means that based on our, the information that we collected from all over the world, we're able to recognize and kind of this genetic, like major chromosomal aberrations based on the behavior of the embryo, based on the visual, appearance of the embryo. Though it's just, few cells, but the dynamics between the cells and the morphokinetics, like the way that the cells look like and the way that the cells are moving, we can recognize, these major genetic abnormalities. We cannot recognize specific defects or specific, mutations like BRCA, for example, but we are capable of recognizing major abnormalities like Down syndrome, for example, in a non-invasive way. It's a non-invasive way, so it's a big advantage,
Absolutely, it's a great advantage, and we have some great questions coming in. So, our next question: are there any consequences or side effects to taking fertility medicine or treatment?
Oh, wow, it's a very good question. So basically, fertility treatments, as any other treatments, you have side effects. Okay, I think people today are aware of it. So, so it's a very general question, but I'll touch upon like the most prevalent things that we need to be aware of. So usually people are going through fertility treatments, or so they are administered with hormones that they need to take. These hormones, the hormones that I mentioned before, FSH, LH, that come from the brain naturally. So for those women, they will have these hormones, in an artificial way. They will get it with injections or, with pills. And so usually I would say that the biggest side effect that we want to go through is what we call OHSS, which is overstimulation ovarian syndrome. That we give the hormones because we want to stimulate the ovaries of the women. We want to stimulate the ovaries. It means that we want to help the follicles to grow. We want to mimic, the natural process. But, when you do it with artificial hormones that are administered, you need to be very careful to not overstimulate the women, because there might be, consequences, side effects, and in the very extreme situations, it could be even dangerous and life-threatening. But usually women who are going through IVF and are administered with high dosages of hormones are monitored by experts to make sure that they are not, suffering from this. And besides this, which is could be get to a life-threatening situation, other side effects, bad mood, nervous. Some will, have more appetite, less appetite, can affect, how they sleep, what they want to eat. I think women are very familiar with these situations.
Yes. Thank you. We are getting a couple of questions related to smoking. So I will just share them with you, and then maybe the answers will overlap a little bit. So one of the questions is, do tobacco smokers who switch to vaping have the same outcome when trying to conceive a child? And I will add to that question with another viewer's question. If I am a guy and I quit smoking right now, when can I start trying for kids to conceive?
So again, the research that was done on smoking was done on cigarettes. I'm not familiar with the research that was, going into the details and, discriminating kind of different types of cigarettes. It was smoking in general. So this is first thing. And the second question my answer would be, do not wait. You need to quit smoking, because smoking, we know today that there is a negative impact also on men's fertility, on the sperm. And again, it's the couple that will have double chances that even if the couple needs fertility treatment, they will have double chances to fail. So, but I would anyway, do not wait. Keep smoking yesterday. Quit smoking yesterday, but not wait to start your fertility journey. You can start. If you want to have, we want to conceive now, you can start doing it whilst quitting smoking, because it's not that smoking impacts the health, like, will impact the process more than the age or the time you need to start. And with smoking, by the way, it's like going back to what I said, smoking father, like someone who will smoke, also in the presence of his children, is very not healthy. So it's very good to try, though I know it's very hard to quit smoking. And you don't need to wait. Like, don't take intervals.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that. We have a viewer who is thanking you again for raising the importance of the language around miscarriage and pregnancy loss. And our next question is about pregnancy loss and asks Dr. Yael, from your experience, what are the reasons for early or multiple early pregnancy loss?
Wow. So first of all, early pregnancy loss, as I mentioned before, up to 80% is because of, unfluidity, what we call genetic abnormalities, like it's embryos that from the moment that they were created, they got I would say, the wrong set of chromosomes. And actually it means that from the moment that they were created, they had no chances to survive. So this is the major cause of early pregnancy loss. Now, usually the high level recommendation, not high level, but the recommendation is that if you experience 3 pregnancy loss, so you need only then you need to start, to go to investigate why did it happen. Sometimes it's because of structural abnormalities of the uterus, that the uterus cannot contain the pregnancy. It could be because of problems with your coagulation system. Hypercoagulation, for example, can cause pregnancy loss, and other reasons. So the high-level recommendation is that if you experience 3 pregnancy losses, so then you need to go and investigate why did it happen. But I would say, to my friends on the call here, that if it happens twice, it's a good idea to go and investigate. Though most of the chances is still, statistically, it just can happen twice to the same person, and it doesn't mean that you have a specific problem. It could be the same problem that I mentioned before, the most prevalent one, the unfluidity. But still, after 2 times, I think that also, mentally, people want to make sure that there is no reason. And sometimes they just need the doctor to look in their eyes and say, there is no reason, I can assure you, like, you're okay. And it's because of your chromosomal thing. And it, makes a closure. And it's a very important thing, I think.
Thank you. We will take 2 more questions. We have a viewer asking, are there advances in technology that can help detect genetic abnormalities while the woman is pregnant? If yes, then are there ways to fix these abnormalities while the woman is pregnant?
Well, so once the embryo is implanted and, it's growing, so I'm not aware of a way to fix it, because this is kind of, it's DNA, right? So I'm not aware of a way, as long as, like, to my knowledge, to the best of my knowledge, I'm not aware of ways to do it, because it's quite impossible. So this answers the last part of the question, which is was very interesting. I didn't expect it, so it's a very smart question. But the first part is, yes, we have different ways to to test and make sure that, and and see if the embryo could have a genetic abnormality or no during the pregnancy. So I mentioned earlier ways to test the embryo for genetic abnormalities before it was transferred to the uterus. But also once that the embryo is transferred and it's growing, we have different tests that can detect, different tests that are looking, like examining the embryo, looking on different parameters, and examining the embryo is hard. All these ultrasound checks that the women needs to go through their pregnancy, and there are also blood tests that they can, can detect, DNA of the embryo in the mother's blood. Today it's called a test that's called NIPT. It can detect the DNA of the embryo from mother's blood, and then we can analyze it and see if there is a genetic condition or not. And then it's more about, once a genetic condition is diagnosed, so it's more about just explaining the couple what this genetic condition mean to them, and what does it mean to the baby, and they need to take a decision what they want to do with the pregnancy. But I'm not aware of a way to fix, like the same that you cannot fix, like a baby that was already born. So it's, maybe in the future, but not for now.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yael. We will take our last question. And this is a very exciting question. Does your company provide similar prices to traditional IVF clinics?
So we're currently just started, marketing our first product, which is the embryo selection platform, and we have special rates that are depending on the location of the clinic and the number of the cycles that the clinic is doing. And really, our goal is to shorten this journey for patients and to ease this journey for patients. So it really depends on the clinic, and there are a lot of parameters, but happily, clinics who want to collaborate with us, we are very open, and there's a lot of other research, like great research projects that we are working on that I'm happy to share with and collaborate with us.
Great, that is so exciting, and I would like to thank you again, Dr. Yael, for the work that you do, for the insight that you brought us today. And I would like to ask you if you have a closing message for our viewers today.
So first of all, I had a great time with you. I hope you enjoyed our conversation. And whoever wants to, to reach me with specific questions, I'm always open. And through the Global Health Bank, you can reach me and forward your questions. This is first thing. I want to touch one point that we didn't discuss, and I think it's very important. So I'll do it briefly. Zarmina, with your permission.
Please.
I'll do it very briefly because I think it's very important. And the point I want to touch is actually the mental aspects of going through infertility. So again, I'll do it very briefly. I think that we all know that our thoughts impact our emotions, and our emotions have a very strong impact on our body. So when it comes to infertility, this circle works very well also for infertility patients. And again, I like sticking to numbers, so I'll just want to share with our friends that there are like two big US studies. One is the study that just asked people who went through infertility how this experience felt like to them, how it was going through infertility. And about 50% of women and 15% of men answered that going through infertility was the hardest experience that they had in their life, like most frustrating and very hard. In another study, and this is why I want to bring it up here, another study from also a very huge American study showed that people who are going through infertility have 4 times more chances to suffer from depression, anxiety, and other mental conditions. So I think there are 2 things we can learn from this. First is that if you're going through infertility and you feel stressful and you feel that you have, this distress, you're normal, because, it is a very stressful situation. And the second is more, that it would be a very good idea to try and seek for some support, because there are also many studies on the support and emotional support during infertility. For example, one big study, also American study, that showed that people who went through infertility with emotional support had 60% more chances to conceive. So there is a lot of value in this emotional support. And I think it's both for this, like the environment of the patient, but also for the patient himself, that you need to try and acquire skills, to cope with the situation, try to be optimistic, try, to find things that relax you. And it's not about, and when I'm saying relax, it's not about just go to the beach, have a drink with a friend or something. Not. It's just really, acquire skills that will help you. You're embarking on a long journey. You need, to try to be more a positive thinker. And studies show that kind of support groups are very efficient in this situation. And also, so this is the message for the patient, that relax is not just, it's a work, not just relax. It's actually, find a ways, sophisticated ways to relax. It could be go to a therapist. It's not a wrong word in terms of infertility. And so find more sophisticated ways to relax that will really work for you. And there is no one, there is no one method that fits all. Everyone needs to find what helps him to be more comfortable, to be more, relaxed, and to acquire the right skills. And also, I think my message is more to the environment of the patient. If this is the husband or friends or sisters, whatever it is, fertility is still something, not only pregnancy loss, but fertility still today, we're 2020, still fertility is something that people feel not always comfortable to share.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the environment has a very strong, it has a very strong influence here to, to accept the patient, to talk about this, to express their interest to hear about this. And hopefully we will have, healthy couples, healthy mothers, and healthy babies to everyone. And I'm wishing everyone a happy new year. And, be healthy, you and your families, and all the best.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yael. That was such a positive and hopeful message to end on, and such a timely reminder as well. I would like to thank you again and thank all our viewers who logged in today, who submitted their questions and stayed with us throughout this episode. We hoped you gained some insight from today's discussion, and I will link Dr. Yael's LinkedIn page and all the links in our description below. And once again, thank you everyone. Have a great evening and see you at the next Wellness Wednesday live webinar. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.